You are a tramp. And your kid will be too, Derek screamed, his voice slicing through the freezing Chicago air harder than the blizzard. He slammed the penthouse door, leaving me and my feverish 3-year-old daughter to die in the snow. He thought he had just discarded a helpless homeless woman to clear the way for his wealthy mistress. He did not know he had just signed his death warrant by provoking the daughter of the ghost. My name is Scarlett, and at that moment, my identity felt as fractured as the expensive vase shattering against the wall behind me. I stood paralyzed in the center of the obsidian-tiled living room, clutching my 3-year-old daughter, Luna, against my chest. Her small body was radiating a terrifying heat that soaked through my thin sweater, burning my skin even as the draft from the open balcony chilled my bones. Derek was not the man I married. The man throwing my clothes into a heap by the elevator was a monster shedding his human skin. He hurled a battered suitcase across the polished marble floor. It skidded to a halt at my feet. He turned to me, his face twisted in a sneer I had never seen before. You are a tramp. And your kid will be too, he screamed, spit flying from his lips. Get out of my house. I am done playing charity ward for a woman who brings nothing to the table. Take that bastard child and get the hell out. He was denying her. He was looking at his own daughter, who had his eyes, and treating her like a disease. The scent of expensive perfume hit me before I saw her. Vanessa, the daughter of Senator Vance, lounged on the Italian leather sofa, sipping champagne as if she were watching a boring reality show. She looked me up and down with eyes that held zero empathy. God, Derek. Look at her, Vanessa drawled, swirling her glass. Those sweatpants look like they came from a dumpster. Does she even know what silk feels like? It is embarrassing that you let that thing sleep in your bed. I ignored her. I ignored the insult to my dignity because panic was clawing at my throat. Luna let out a weak whimper, her head lolling against my shoulder. Derek, please, I begged, my voice cracking. I do not care about the house or the money, but Luna, she needs her antibiotics. The fever is over 103. She could die if we go out there. He laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. He walked over, grabbed my arm, and shoved me backward with enough force that I stumbled, barely keeping my balance to protect Luna's head. Not my kid. Not my problem, he spat. Security. Get this trash out of my sight before she stains the carpet. 2 burly guards appeared and dragged us into the elevator. The ride down was a blur of tears. But the lobby was worse. 2 police officers were waiting near the concierge desk. I rushed toward them, hope flaring in my chest like a dying ember. Officer, please help. My husband threw us out. My baby is sick. Vanessa stepped out of the private elevator behind me. She walked straight to the sergeant and slipped a thick white envelope into his pocket with a practiced hand. The officer did not even blink. He turned to me, his hand resting ominously on his baton. Ma'am, we have a report of trespassing and harassment, the officer said, his voice hard and cold. I suggest you disappear. Right now. Or you spend the night in a holding cell while your kid goes to foster care. The heavy glass doors slammed shut behind us, locking us out of the warmth and the light. The Chicago winter hit me like a physical blow. The wind howled through the streets, carrying razor-sharp snowflakes that stung my cheeks. I had no money. My phone lay in pieces on the penthouse floor where Derek had smashed it with a golf club. I just walked. I walked until my feet went numb in my canvas sneakers. Luna stopped whimpering. That was when the real terror set in. Her little body went rigid in my arms, then began to jerk violently. No, 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 no. Luna, stay with me. Mommy is here. I sobbed into the wind, but the wind did not care. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the dirty slush in front of a dilapidated hotel with a flickering neon sign. The world was spinning. Through the haze of hypothermia and panic, a memory surfaced. I saw myself 7 years ago, screaming at a man in a black suit, telling him I chose love over his blood money. I had sworn I would never go back. I had sworn I would never beg him for a single cent. But looking at Luna's blue lips, I realized pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. I spotted a payphone near the hotel entrance. It was a relic, covered in graffiti and rust. I dug into my pocket with frozen fingers and found a single quarter I had picked up off the sidewalk earlier that day. My hands shook so badly it took me 3 tries to insert the coin. I dialed the number. It was not a standard number. It was an encrypted sequence I had been forced to memorize when I was 10 years old. The line clicked. There was no ringtone, just a heavy, expectant silence on the other end. I knew he was there. I knew he was listening. "Daddy," I whispered, my voice breaking under the weight of my shame and desperation. "Help me, please." The voice that answered was deeper than the night and colder than the ice on the pavement. It was the voice of a man who commanded armies in the shadows. "Location activated," he said, the tone leaving no room for doubt. "Dad is coming." Daughter. It had been exactly 5 minutes since I hung up the phone. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, dying shadows across the snow. Suddenly, the roar of an engine drowned out the howling wind. It was not a car. A massive black helicopter with no identification numbers descended straight into the middle of the intersection, its rotors whipping the snow into a blinding white vortex. Cars slammed on their brakes, tires screeching against the ice as the aircraft touched down with terrifying precision, blocking all traffic. Before the landing gear even settled, the side doors flew open. A dozen men clad in full tactical gear poured out, moving with a lethal fluidity that made the local police look like mall security. They formed an impenetrable perimeter around me and Luna, their rifles raised but pointed low. Passers-by who had previously ignored a freezing woman now scrambled away in terror, dropping their phones and bags. Then, the center of the formation parted. A man stepped out of the helicopter cabin. He wore a bespoke Italian wool coat that cost more than Derek's entire wardrobe, and his silver hair was swept back with severe perfection. Victor Sterling, the ghost. The man who held the secrets of half the American government in his safe. He walked toward me, his face a mask of iron, but as he looked down at my shivering form and the blue-tinged face of his granddaughter, that iron mask cracked. His eyes, usually cold enough to freeze hell over, glistened with unshed tears. "Dad," I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. I am so sorry." He did not say a word. He simply knelt in the slush, ruining his trousers, and scooped Luna out of my arms. He handed her to a team of trauma doctors who had rushed out behind him. They placed my daughter into a high-tech mobile incubator right there on the asphalt. "Stabilize her." "Now," Victor commanded, his voice low and dangerous. "We have a heartbeat, but it is faint. We need to move." "Sir, 10 minutes to the facility," one of the doctors shouted over the roar of the rotors. As the medical team rushed Luna onto the chopper, Victor helped me stand. He took off his coat and wrapped it around my shoulders. It smelled of expensive tobacco and safety. He turned his gaze toward the penthouse balcony towering above us, where the lights of Derek's party still blazed. He spoke to his personal assistant, who stood ready with a tablet. "Do not touch him yet," Victor said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "In exactly 1 year, I want him to climb to the highest peak. Give him the contracts. Give him the fame. Let him think he is a god. I want him so high up that when he falls, his bones will shatter into dust. The world faded into blackness as the adrenaline finally left my system. I woke up to the steady rhythm of a heart monitor. The air smelled of lavender and antiseptic. I opened my eyes to see a ceiling painted with calming frescoes, not the water-stained tiles of the cheap hotel. I was in the Sterling family's private medical wing. My body ached, but it was a warm ache, the feeling of healing. I sat up, panic flaring for a second until I saw Luna. She was in the bed next to mine, sleeping peacefully. Her color returned to a healthy pink. A nurse was adjusting her IV drip. I sank back into the pillows, a wave of self-loathing washing over me. I had been so stupid. I had traded my identity as the heiress to a global security empire for a man who saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone. I had rejected my father's protection to prove I could make it on my own. And it had almost cost my daughter her life. The door opened and Victor walked in. He held a thick black dossier in his hand. He sat on the edge of my bed and placed the file on my lap. "You need to see this," he said softly. I opened the folder. It was a detailed financial report. My eyes widened as I scanned the pages. He emptied the joint savings account, I whispered, my hands trembling. That was my college fund. The money I saved from waiting tables. $70,000. He used it to buy his way onto the ballot, Victor explained, pointing to a photograph of a campaign poster. "Derek is running for mayor. He used your money to launch his campaign, claiming it was a self-made investment. He is building his platform on family values while throwing his wife and child into a blizzard." Something inside me snapped. The grief and the shame evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard knot in the center of my chest. I looked at Luna, sleeping so innocently, and then I looked at the face of the man who had tried to erase us. I closed the folder. The Scarlet who begged for antibiotics was dead. The woman sitting in that hospital bed was a Sterling. "I do not want you to kill him." "Dad," I said, my voice steady. "That is too easy. I want to take everything. His name, his money, his hope." Victor watched me, a small, proud smile touching his lips. "And how do you plan to do that?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Khan. I will bury him myself." Victor nodded, standing up and smoothing his suit. "Good. Rest for 2 days. Then pack your bags. We are going to the camp. The camp. The legendary training facility where my father molded economic spies and psychological assassins. It was time for school. The crystal chandeliers of the grand ballroom at the Vance Plaza glittered like diamonds, but they were nothing compared to the ice in my veins. It had been exactly 1 year since I was thrown out onto these very streets like garbage. Tonight, however, I was not the shivering woman begging for medicine. I stood at the top of the velvet-carpeted staircase, watching the man who tried to destroy me. Derek stood in the center of the room, holding court. He looked every inch the successful politician, his smile practiced and bright. Beside him, Vanessa clung to his arm, her hand resting protectively over a baby bump that I knew for a fact was nothing more than foam and silicone padding. They were playing the perfect American family to secure the suburban vote. The master of ceremonies tapped his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the representative from the Aurora Sovereign Fund of Europe, Ms. Scarlet Rose." I descended the stairs. I was wearing a custom Givenchy gown made of liquid silver silk that clung to my body like a second skin. My hair, once dull and messy, was now a sleek, dark curtain cut in a sharp bob. My makeup was flawless, highlighting cheekbones that had been sharpened by a year of brutal survival training. The room went silent. I saw Derek's head snap up, his eyes widened, not with recognition, but with pure, unadulterated lust and greed. He did not see the wife he had discarded. He saw a walking bank vault. I walked straight through the crowd, the sea of tuxedos parting for me. Mr. Mayor-to-be, I said, extending a gloved hand. My voice was an octave lower than he remembered, trained to command attention. I have heard. Fascinating things about your vision for this city. Derek took my hand, lingering a moment too long. Ms. Rose, the pleasure is all mine. I must say, you are the most captivating investor we have had all season. Vanessa stiffened beside him, her eyes narrowing. She sensed the danger, like a dog sensing a wolf, but she was trapped by the occasion. Vanessa. I nodded to her, my smile not reaching my eyes. You look glowing. When is the baby due 5 months? Vanessa lied, forcing a smile. We are so excited. Children are such a blessing, I said, my gaze drifting back to Derek. It is a shame when parents cannot provide for them, but I suppose you too will never have that problem. I saw a flicker of confusion in Derek's eyes, a subconscious prickle of guilt, but he pushed it away instantly. He was too focused on the prize. I understand you are looking for capital for the Green City Initiative, I said, shifting into business mode. My analysts have looked at the proposal. It is ambitious, but frankly, Derek. Can I call you Derek? It lacks the necessary aggression. Derek looked mesmerized. I began to dismantle his economic strategy, citing market trends and political leverage points with a precision that left him breathless. I was quoting the very strategies my father used to topple governments. You really understand the game. Derek breathed, stepping closer, effectively turning his back on Vanessa. I reached up and touched the necklace at my throat. It was a cheap, tarnished silver locket, the only thing I had kept from our marriage. He had bought it for me at a gas station when we were 20. Amidst the diamonds and platinum I was wearing, it stuck out like a sore thumb. Derek's eyes dropped to the locket. He frowned, a shadow of a memory passing over his face. That necklace, he murmured. It looks familiar. Does it? I asked softly, leaning in. It was a gift from a man who passed away, a reminder that even the smallest things can have great value. He shook his head, dismissing the thought. He had forgotten. He had truly erased me. Listen, Scarlett, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We need a lead investor, someone with vision. I am prepared to authorize an injection of $50 million, I said calmly. Derek nearly choked on his champagne. 50 million. Yes, but the board requires security, a collateral agreement. It is just a formality, of course, a shadow mortgage on your personal assets to guarantee the loan. It was a trap, a blatant, dangerous trap. But I saw the avarice flare in his eyes, burning out any caution. He looked at Vanessa, then back at me, calculating. I can handle the paperwork, Derek said quickly. When can we sign tonight? I whispered. Meet me in the executive suite in 30 minutes, alone. My lawyers are very private. I will be there, he promised. I walked away, feeling his gaze burning a hole in my back. I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and took a sip. It tasted like victory. The hook was set. Now, I just had to reel him in. Accessing Derek's internal server was laughably easy. He had given me the administrative password himself, believing I needed to audit the financials for the Scarlet Rose Foundation's investment. I sat in his leather chair late one Tuesday night, the glow of the monitor illuminating the dark office. What I found made my stomach turn. The Green City project was not building affordable housing. It was a massive washing machine. Derek was filtering millions of dollars for a notorious Eastern European arms syndicate, disguising the dirty cash as construction material costs and labor fees. I forwarded the encrypted files to my father's intelligence team. Within an hour, I received a confirmation message. They had traced the money flow to 3 shell companies in the Cayman Islands, all registered under Derek's name but crucially linked to a fake identity he used for his illicit dealings. The noose was ready. I just had to convince him to stick his head in it. The next morning, I invited Vanessa to coffee at the Ritz. I played the role of the concerned confidant perfectly. Vanessa. "I really should not be telling you this," I said, lowering my voice and leaning over my untouched latte. "But in the due diligence reports, I saw some irregularities. Large transfers from Derek's personal holding company to an account listed under a woman's name. Miss K. Vanessa's face went pale beneath her heavy foundation. Her hand shook as she set down her cup. "A woman Are you sure?" she stammered, her eyes darting around the room nervously. "It could be nothing," I soothed, pouring gasoline on the fire. "But if I were you, I would want to know where my husband's money is going before the baby arrives." I watched the paranoia take root. By noon, my sources confirmed that Vanessa had hired a private investigator to tail her own husband. The cracks in their perfect facade were starting to spread. 2 days later, I orchestrated a collision of worlds. I took Luna to the park directly across from City Hall, knowing Derek took his lunch break there to appeal to voters. Luna was 4 years old now, sharp as a tack and possessing a beauty that already rivaled the Sterling legacy. Derek walked down the path, surrounded by aides, checking his watch. I let go of Luna's hand for a split second. She chased her ball right into his path. Derek stopped abruptly, nearly tripping over her. He looked down, annoyance flashing across his face before he realized people were watching. He forced a stiff smile. "Careful there, little girl," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. I stood 10 feet away, hidden behind oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was looking right at his own daughter, the child he had claimed was not his. And he saw nothing but a stranger. Luna tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that unsettled him. "You look like the bad man on the television my mommy watches," Luna said, her voice clear and innocent. The aides chuckled nervously. Derek's smile faltered. I am the good guy, sweetheart. I am going to be the mayor," he said, but he took a step back, clearly uncomfortable. He brushed past her without a second glance. He did not feel the bond. He did not feel the blood connection. He was truly hollow. That evening, I decided to twist the knife. I had my team release a series of grainy but identifiable photographs to his political rival. They showed Derek entering a hotel room with 2 high-end escorts, women I had personally paid to be there, though nothing had actually happened. The scandal broke at 6 o'clock. The media went into a frenzy. Derek's poll numbers plummeted instantly. He called me in a panic, his voice trembling. "Scarlett, you have to help me. It is a setup. They are trying to ruin me," he screamed into the phone. I let him sweat for a moment before answering. "Calm down. Derek, I believe you. I will handle this." I called a press conference an hour later. Standing in front of a dozen microphones, I looked directly into the cameras. I have known Derek Vance as a man of integrity. I lied, my voice steady and convincing. The Scarlet Rose Foundation stands by him. These allegations are clearly deep fakes created by desperate opponents who fear his vision. My defense turned the tide. The narrative shifted from Derek the adulterer to Derek the victim of a smear campaign. When I walked into his office that night, he looked at me like I was a deity. He poured 2 glasses of scotch, his hands shaking. "You saved my life," he breathed, downing the drink in one gulp. "Vanessa." She did not even ask if it was true. She just started screaming about money. She is hysterical. I am sick of her. He walked around the desk and stood in front of me, his eyes dark with desire and gratitude. "I need someone who understands power," he whispered, reaching out to touch my arm. "Someone like you. Vanessa is a child. You are a queen, I think." I think I am falling for you, Scarlett. I forced myself not to recoil at his touch. I smiled, a predator looking at its prey. Is that so, Derek? I asked softly. Then perhaps it is time we made some changes. He had no idea. He was falling in love with the ghost of the woman he had murdered. The realization hit me harder than the blizzard that had nearly killed me a year ago. As I decrypted the final layer of Derek's private server, I found a folder time-stamped the exact night he threw me out. It was not just about Vanessa. It was never just about Vanessa. I had walked into his study earlier that evening to clean, and I had lingered too long over a set of blueprints for the North Side Bridge project. I thought he was angry about me snooping, but now I knew the truth. I had seen the structural failure reports he was trying to bury. He did not just kick out a wife, he evicted a witness. My father walked into the command center, his face grim. "We found him," Victor said, sliding a tablet across the glass table. "Arthur Miller, the site foreman." Derek declared him mentally incompetent and locked him away in a high-security nursing home in the middle of nowhere. He is the only one left who knows what really happened. "Get the team," I said, zipping up my tactical vest. "We are bringing him home." The extraction was surgical. At 2 o'clock in the morning, our convoy silenced the security feed of the shadowy care facility. My father's men moved like ghosts, neutralizing the guards without a sound. We found Arthur in a sedated haze in room 304. When we dragged him into the fresh air, he looked at me with wild, terrified eyes. They are in the pillars." Arthur stammered, his hands shaking violently as he grabbed my arm. The concrete. It was not dry. Derek said to pour. He said, "Pour it now, or you are fired." 3 men. They slipped. They fell into the wet cement foundation. And he just kept pouring. I felt bile rise in my throat. Derek was not just a thief or an adulterer. He was a murderer. He had entombed 3 human beings in the foundation of his career to avoid a construction delay penalty. While we were securing the witness, chaos was erupting back in the city. I had timed the transfer of Derek's personal funds perfectly. Vanessa, checking her accounts for a shopping spree, discovered that the joint account containing nearly $2 million was empty. I watched the feed from the hidden camera in Derek's office with a glass of red wine in my hand. Vanessa stormed in like a hurricane, sweeping a stack of papers off his desk. "You stole it?" Vanessa screamed, her face contorted with rage. "You emptied our account. That was my money too. You miserable leech, Vanessa." "Shut up," Derek hissed, checking the door frantically. "I invested it. It is for the deal with Scarlet Rose. It will triple in a month. I do not care about your deals," she shrieked, grabbing a vase and smashing it against the wall. "I am done pretending. I am sick of wearing this foam belly. I am sick of faking morning sickness for your stupid voters. If you do not put that money back, I will tell the world there is no baby." I smiled, my finger hovering over the send button on my laptop. "Gotcha," I whispered. I clipped the audio file, specifically the part about the fake pregnancy and the stolen money, and sent it directly to the private email of Senator Vance, Vanessa's father. The fallout was instantaneous. Within 20 minutes, the senator's chief of staff called Derek. I could not hear the other side of the call, but I watched Derek's face turn the color of ash. He dropped the phone. The senator had just pulled the plug. No more campaign funds, no more political protection. Derek was naked in a tank full of sharks. At 3 a.m, my penthouse doorbell rang incessantly. I checked the monitor. It was Derek. He looked manic, his tie undone, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. I opened the door, wearing a silk robe, feigning sleepiness. "Derek, it is late. What is?" He pushed past me, falling to his knees on my rug. He grabbed my hand, his palms clammy and trembling. "Scarlett, please. You have to sign the transfer now," he begged, his voice cracking. "The senator." He pulled out. I have cash flow issues. I need that $50 million immediately. If you do not fund the project by morning, I am dead. They will come for me. I looked down at him. The man who had once towered over me was now groveling at my feet, desperate for a lifeline that was actually a noose. $50 million is a lot of money to move this early. Derek, I said coolly, are you sure you have everything under control? Yes, yes, I swear, he cried, tears of panic welling in his eyes. Just help me. Please, I will do anything. You are the only one I can trust. Anything I asked. A cruel smile touching my lips. Anything, he sobbed. Go home, Derek, I said softly. I will have the papers ready at 9 o'clock. You will get your money. He kissed my hand like a devout worshiper and stumbled out into the night, believing he had been saved. He did not know he had just made a deal with the devil, and I was coming to collect his soul. The morning sun sliced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my temporary office, illuminating the sweat beading on Derek's forehead. It was exactly 9 o'clock. He sat across from me, his leg bouncing nervously, staring at the stack of documents I had placed between us. The transfer is ready to go. Derek, I said, sliding a heavy fountain pen across the mahogany desk. $50 million, deposited directly into your campaign accounts and the Green City Operational Fund. But, as discussed, I require security. 51% of your personal holding company. Derek swallowed hard, loosening his tie. He was so desperate to plug the hole the senator had left that he did not even look at the pages. 51%, he muttered, his voice shaking. That gives you controlling interest. It is everything I have built. It is the cost of doing business when you are in a crisis, I replied, my voice devoid of sympathy. Take it or leave it. But remember, the bank calls your loans at noon. He snatched the pen. He did not read a single word. He did not see the morals clause on page 42, stating that any public scandal or act of moral turpitude would result in an immediate default, transferring full ownership of his assets to the lender. He just signed, scratch, scratch, scratch. He signed away his life. Done. He breathed, looking up with a pathetic mixture of relief and hope. Now, the money, it is being processed. I smiled. You can go now. The moment the elevator doors closed on his retreating figure, I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the First National Bank, an institution my father had quietly acquired 3 months ago. Execute the default clause, I ordered. Freeze everything. Checking, savings, offshore. Seize the properties. He is insolvent. By the time I reached the street in my limousine, the chaos had already begun. My driver took me to the old penthouse, the place Derek had thrown me out of exactly 1 year ago. The scene was almost poetic. Vanessa was standing on the curb, surrounded by Louis Vuitton luggage. She was screaming at 2 eviction officers who were barring her re-entry. You cannot do this. I am Vanessa Vance, she shrieked, her face blotchy with tears and mascara. My father is a senator. Your father is not on the deed, ma'am, the officer replied impassively. The property has been foreclosed by the new owner. I signaled my driver to stop. I rolled down the tinted window just enough for her to see me. Vanessa froze, her eyes widening in shock. Scarlet Rose, she gasped, rushing toward the car. You did this? You bought the house. I looked at her, really looked at her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the raw panic of someone who had never known a day of hardship in her life. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single crisp $5 bill. I let it flutter out of the window. It landed in a puddle of dirty slush at her feet. Buy some dignity, I said, my voice cutting through the cold air like a knife. You will need it. I rolled up the window before she could respond, leaving her screaming in the rearview mirror, just a ghost of the woman who had mocked my poverty. Derek's world collapsed an hour later. I ignored his first 10 calls, then 20. Finally, he ran to my office building, desperate for answers. But as he sprinted into the lobby, he skidded to a halt. Workers were on ladders, removing the Rose Capitol sign. In its place, shining in bold, unforgiving steel, were the words Sterling Corp. I watched him from the mezzanine balcony. He stared at the sign, his mouth hanging open. He knew the name. Everyone knew the name Sterling. It meant power. It meant the ghost. He realized he had been played, that Scarlet Rose was just a Trojan horse sent to destroy him. But the fool still did not connect the dots. He still did not know that the woman destroying him was the same woman he had called a tramp. He turned to run, to find me, but two men in leather jackets stepped out from the shadows of the revolving doors. They were not my father's men. They were rougher, scarred, with tattoos creeping up their necks. The arms dealers. They had realized the money Derek promised to wash was gone. "Mr. Mayor," one of them growled, stepping into Derek's path. "We need to have a little chat about our investment. The boss is very unhappy." Derek's face went white. He looked up at the balcony, searching for salvation, but I stepped back into the shadows. He was alone, and the wolves were hungry. The metallic tang of blood hung heavy in the freezing air of the abandoned packing plant. I stood in the shadows of the rusted catwalk, looking down at the center of the concrete floor. Derek was zip-tied to a steel chair, his face a swollen mask of purple and red. He was coughing up blood onto his expensive Italian shirt, the one I had bought him for his campaign kickoff just 3 weeks ago. The leader of the arms syndicate, a brute named Sergei, paced around him, holding a heavy wrench. "Where is the money?" Derek Sergei roared, swinging the wrench and smashing it into Derek's knee. I swear, it is coming," Derek screamed, his voice ragged with agony. "My investor." "Scarlet Rose. She has the money. Let me call her again." "Please," Sergei spat on the floor and nodded to his subordinate. They handed Derek his cracked phone. He dialed my number with trembling, broken fingers. I let it ring twice before I signaled my father. The massive corrugated iron doors of the warehouse began to grind open. Light from the high beams of 3 SUVs cut through the gloom, blinding the gangsters. Derek lifted his head, a look of pathetic hope washing over his battered face. "Scarlet," he cried out, squinting into the light. "Scarlet, help me. Tell them about the transfer. I walked into the light." I was flanked by Victor and a squad of 6 mercenaries who moved with the silent discipline of predators. The gangsters raised their weapons, but the moment Sergei saw the silver-haired man beside me, he froze. The color drained from the gangster's face. He dropped the wrench. "Mr. Sterling," Sergei whispered, bowing his head in a display of terrifying submission. We did not know he was yours." Derek looked between the terrified gangster and my father, confusion warring with his pain. "What is going on?" Derek wheezed. "Scarlet, why are you with him? That is Victor Sterling. He is dangerous. Tell him to pay them." I stopped 3 feet in front of him. The silence in the warehouse was absolute. I reached up and slowly removed the oversized designer sunglasses I had worn for every meeting as Scarlet Rose. I took a makeup wipe from my pocket and aggressively scrubbed the dark lipstick from my mouth, revealing my natural, pale lips. I pulled the pins from my hair, letting it fall in the messy waves he used to say looked unkempt. I leaned in close, forcing him to look into the eyes he had avoided for years. "Recognize me yet, husband?" I asked softly. Derek blinked. He stared at me, his brain struggling to reconcile the powerful billionaire investor with the memory of the woman he had kicked into the snow. Then, recognition hit him like a physical blow. His jaw dropped, and his eyes bulged with sheer horror. "You," he stuttered, his breath hitching in his throat. You are the tramp." "That is right," I said, my voice cold enough to freeze the blood on his face. "I was a tramp because of you. I starved because of you. But now Now I am the creditor of your life." Victor stepped forward. He did not even look at Derek. He tossed a thick manila folder onto Derek's lap. It slid off his bloody legs and spilled open on the floor, revealing crime scene photos and blueprints. "This is the evidence that you ordered wet concrete to be poured over 3 living men," Victor said, his voice resonating with authority. "We found the bodies an hour ago. The police are 5 minutes away." Derek began to hyperventilate. No, I can fix this, Scarlett. Please." "We were married. I loved you." Victor drew a suppressed pistol from his coat, his eyes narrowing. "I should save the taxpayers the money and end this filth right now." I placed a hand on my father's arm, gently lowering his weapon. "Not yet. Dad," I said, staring at the man who destroyed my family. "Prison is too easy for him right now. He still thinks he is a victim. I want the world to see him for what he is. I want him to lose his name, his pride, and his hope before he loses his freedom." I turned to walk away, the sound of sirens wailing in the distance. "Leave him for the cops," I ordered Sergei. "If you touch him again, you answer to the Sterlings." As we walked out into the cold night, Derek's screams followed us, not of pain, but of a man who realized he had been fighting a war he lost the moment he opened his mouth that winter night. It cost me exactly $500,000 to post his bail. My lawyers argued that he was not a flight risk, primarily because I had confiscated his passport and the Russian mob was waiting for him at the airport. Derek walked out of the precinct, not as a free man, but as a walking corpse. He had one option left. He had to win the election. If he became mayor, he believed he would have the police protection and political immunity to keep the wolves at bay. He did not realize he was just a puppet dancing on my strings for one final humiliating show. The night of the debate, the television studio was packed. I sat in the very first row. Center stage. I was bouncing Luna on my lap. She was wearing a red velvet dress that cost more than Derek's car. Derek stood behind his podium, his skin the color of old paste. He was sweating so profusely that his makeup was melting down his collar. Every time he looked at the camera, his eyes darted to me and then to the shadowy corners of the room where he imagined assassins were hiding. My hand-picked opponent, a sharp-tongued prosecutor named Mr. Henderson, did not hold back. "Mr. Vance," Henderson boomed into his microphone, "you claim to be a pillar of fiscal responsibility. Yet, auditors found a $50 million hole in your ledger this morning. Can you explain to the taxpayers where their money went?" Derek gripped the podium, his knuckles white. Well, you see, these things take time to explain," Derek stammered, wiping his forehead with a shaking hand. It is a reallocation of assets for the greater good." I smiled at him. It was a wide, predatory smile. He flinched. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the back of the studio. I had instructed security to stand down. The doors burst open and Vanessa stumbled in. She looked deranged. Her hair was matted, her clothes were torn, and she was clutching a bottle of cheap vodka. "He is a liar!" Vanessa shrieked, stumbling down the aisle. The audience gasped. Cameras swung around to capture the spectacle. Derek's eyes almost popped out of his skull. "Vanessa, honey, please, not now." Derek pleaded into his mic, his voice cracking. "Do not call me honey," she screamed, scrambling up the stairs onto the stage. "He made me do it. There is no baby. Look." She frantically tore at her maternity blouse, ripping it open to reveal a bulky, flesh-colored foam pad strapped to her stomach. She ripped it off and threw it at Derek's head. It bounced off his forehead with a hollow thud. "It is fake. It is all fake, just like him," Vanessa yelled, collapsing onto the floor in a sobbing heap. The studio exploded into chaos. Boos and jeers rained down from the stands. Derek waved his hands frantically, trying to regain control. "Please listen. She is mentally unstable." I love my family, he shouted. I raised my hand. The sound engineer, who was on my payroll, cut Derek's microphone instantly. Derek kept mouthing words, but only silence came out. He tapped the mic, panic rising in his chest. I stood up. The room went quiet, sensing the shift in power. I handed Luna to my father and walked up the steps to the stage. I took the moderator's microphone. I have a story I want to tell you about this candidate, I said, my voice calm and commanding. Derek froze. He shook his head at me, mouthing the word please. 1 year ago, on the coldest night of the decade. I continued, pointing a remote at the giant screen behind the candidates. Derek Vance showed us exactly who he is. I pressed the button. The massive LED screen behind us flickered to life. The grainy, high-definition security footage played for the entire nation to see. It showed the penthouse lobby. It showed Derek shoving a woman holding a convulsing child out into the blizzard. It showed him laughing as the doors closed. The silence in the room was heavier than death. The audio from the giant screen tore through the studio, echoing off the soundproof walls with sickening clarity. Derek's voice, distorted by the security recording but undeniably his, boomed over the speakers. You are a tramp, and your kid will be too. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Every single person in the auditorium, from the cameramen to the front row donors, sat frozen. On the screen, the high-definition footage zoomed in. It showed my desperate, tear-streaked face. But worse, it showed Luna. It showed her tiny body jerking in a violent seizure, her eyes rolling back in her head as the snow began to bury us. A woman in the second row covered her mouth and let out a sob. Then, the rage hit. It was palpable. The audience did not just disapprove. They wanted blood. I turned slowly to look at Derek. He had collapsed. His legs had simply given out under the weight of his own cruelty. He was on his knees, staring up at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You were half right. Derek, I said, my voice amplified by the microphone, cutting through the tension. I was a tramp. I slept in the snow because of you. I begged for loose change because of you. But my child... I walked closer to him, my heels clicking rhythmically on the stage floor. You said she would be a tramp too. You are wrong. She is the granddaughter of Victor Sterling. The name hit the room like a physical shockwave. Victor Sterling, the ghost, the man who owned half the city's debt and all of its secrets. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Then, chaos erupted. The flashbulbs went off like a strobe light storm. Reporters were shouting over each other, frantic to get the shot of the year. Derek's political career did not just die in that moment. It was vaporized into ash. Derek scrambled toward me on his hands and knees, dragging himself across the stage floor. He grabbed the hem of my dress, his tears mixing with the sweat and makeup running down his face. Scarlett, please, I was wrong. I was stressed. Please, forgive me. Do it for Luna. Think of our daughter. I am her father. I stepped back, pulling my dress from his grasp as if his touch were contagious. I signaled to the side of the stage. Victor walked out, holding Luna's hand. She looked like a porcelain doll in her red velvet dress, but her eyes were flint. She stood right in front of the man groveling on the floor. Derek reached out a trembling hand toward her. Luna, sweetie, it is Daddy. Luna did not flinch. She looked at him with a cold, terrifying calmness that she had inherited directly from her grandfather. Mommy says you are not my daddy, she said, her voice small but piercingly clear. My daddy is dead. Before Derek could respond, the heavy double doors at the side of the stage flew open. This time, it was not security. It was the FBI and the Chicago Police Department. They swarmed the stage, their badges flashing under the studio lights. Derek Vance, the lead detective, shouted, hauling Derek up by his collar. "You are under arrest for the murder of 3 construction workers and racketeering across the stage." Vanessa was still sobbing on the floor. A female officer yanked her up and slapped cuffs on her wrists. "You too." "Mrs. Vance," the officer said sharply. "Conspiracy to defraud and filing false police reports." The audience was on its feet, jeering and screaming insults. Someone threw a water bottle that hit Derek in the shoulder. As 2 officers dragged him toward the exit, he fought them, twisting his body to look back at me. He looked insane, his eyes wide with a mixture of madness and regret. Why, he screamed, his voice raw and desperate. Why did you not tell me? Why didn't you tell me who you were? I just watched him go, my face impassive, as the camera lights blinded him one last time. He finally knew who I was, but it was far too late to save himself. As the officers gripped his arms, I signaled for them to pause for just 1 second. I needed to answer his question. I needed him to hear the truth before he vanished into the cage he had built for himself. I leaned in close, my lips brushing against his bruised ear, and whispered the words that would haunt him in his dark cell. "Because you never loved me. You only loved what you thought I could give you." I pulled back, my expression turning to stone. The police dragged him away, forcing him through the center aisle of the studio. The audience, fueled by the horrifying video they had just witnessed, turned into a mob. They screamed insults, spitting at the man who had once been their golden boy. Someone threw a rotten egg that shattered against his cheek. Then came the trash. Empty cups, crumpled papers, and food wrappers rained down on him. Derek Vance, the man who was terrified of being associated with poverty, was dragged out covered in garbage, looking exactly like the tramp he had accused me of being. I turned back to the cameras, composing myself. "As of this morning, Sterling Corp has initiated a hostile takeover of all assets previously held by Derek Vance," I announced, my voice ringing with finality. "We are liquidating everything. The proceeds will not go to profit. Every single cent will be used to build a network of high-quality shelters for women and children in Chicago. No mother will ever have to sleep in the snow again because a man decided she was worthless." The flashbulbs erupted again. I held up a single piece of paper. "And regarding this," I said, pointing to the document, "this is the DNA test Derek demanded. It confirms he is Luna's biological father. However, my legal team has already filed for a permanent termination of parental rights based on attempted murder and child endangerment. He is not a father. He is just a donor." 1 week later, reports reached me from the inside. Derek was currently housed in the general population unit of the state penitentiary. My father, Victor, had made a few quiet phone calls. The guards were looking the other way while Derek received special attention from inmates who had families on the outside that Victor was helping. Derek was living in a constant state of terror, a shadow of the arrogant man he used to be. I sent him one final care package. When the guard tossed the brown paper parcel onto his cot, Derek must have opened it with trembling hands, hoping for food or money. Instead, he found a dirty, threadbare wool coat. It was the same coat I was wearing the night he threw me out. Pinned to the collar was a small note in my handwriting. "Now it is yours. Keep warm." That evening, I stood on the private helipad atop the Sterling Tower. The wind was whipping around us, but for the first time in years, I did not feel the cold. Below me, the city of Chicago was a grid of golden lights, beautiful and distant. Victor stepped up beside me. He was not looking at the city. He was looking at me with a pride that warmed me more than any fire could. He draped a heavy cashmere coat over my shoulders, shielding me and Luna from the wind. "It is over." "Daughter," he said softly. I looked down at Luna. She was holding a new doll, staring out at the helicopter with wide, excited eyes. I knelt and pulled her into a tight embrace. The hatred that had fueled me for 12 long months was gone. drained away like dirty water. In its place was something stronger, something unbreakable. Yes, I whispered into Luna's hair. It is over. I stood up, adjusting my coat. I was no longer the victim. I was no longer the vengeful ex-wife. I was Scarlett Sterling, and I had an empire to run. Let us go home, I said. I turned my back on the city that had once rejected me, leading my daughter toward the waiting helicopter. The rotors spun to life, ready to lift us above the noise, above the pain, and into a future where no one would ever dare to look down on us again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment down below where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. Do not forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.